Hey, this is Frank. You're listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. Do you ever feel like you have friends who sometimes just don't get each other? This is a podcast that I recorded with two of my friends, Jake and Noah. We find out the hard ways we struggle to communicate better and sometimes succeed, but sometimes not. For years, the three of us have talked about communication and how it's sometimes easier said than done. Even when we're trying to be understanding, our well-meaning intentions often get lost in translation. We decided to share these conversations with the world. Join us as we find out what happens when three friends try to learn how to really talk to each other. Yeah, it's great. I think we need to move the time in which we determine the topic up by a week.
I would agree with that.
Like,
all right,
if
what do
we
you guys
could
want to talk
determine
about next week?
week's topic during this podcast, maybe next week's podcast could be better.
Oh, let's do some. You want to do a brainstorming sesh?
Well, we have to publish it on next Tuesday.
I know, because someone didn't break it into two podcasts when we had the
No
opportunity.
one told me to do that.
Origins. Today we brainstorm.
What do you guys think about brainstorming?
Really?
Well, what are the KPIs for it?
I don't think you're taking this seriously.
I don't think you can take something more seriously than to ask what the key performance indicators are for success.
Well,
You know, I actually really like brainstorming, and I've been trying to get my team to brainstorm more often.
in what ways? Like, do you get together in a room and say, hey,
Yeah, I have. I've also done it over like Google Meet or something, like a video conference, but I really like it. I've always done strategy and stuff myself, trying to do less and less of, not that I'm trying to do less strategy, but I'm trying to get other people to do more work and let me think more high level, more and more high level.
mm-hmm.
And so I've been trying to have brainstorming sessions as a way to obviously come up with ideas, but also to help, maybe help teach them how to think.
Mm-hmm. I think just keep talking. Yeah, teach them how to think. Here's how you think.
All right. So give us an example of brainstorming.
An example?
Yeah, I can't say I've ever intentionally brainstormed, but it sounds like you have. So may I have an example, please?
Yeah, like we come up with, right now we're trying to revamp some landing pages for a client. And so rethinking all the way from the audience to conversion. So for an example, in SEO, you want search intent.
Mm-hmm.
You want to create a page for search intent. So you have to start thinking about who is searching and what are they searching for. And then you have to think about the content on that page matching up with the search intent.
While you talk about search intent and the persona associated with it, I imagine people in the brainstorming session going, I think these people would really like blue or something of this level of relevance. And that's what I expect from brainstorming. And so that's what's happening inside of me.
So that's an interesting thought.
This is actually what I wanted to talk about today, was narratives in our head, and we got there. Good job.
Yeah, no, that's far more interesting than brainstorming. The fact that you shut it down because you don't think it's valuable, which is what we do with everything that we shut down.
Yeah, I don't know that I said all of that, but I have been a part of sessions where it's like that, because depending on who is brainstorming and their level of, I don't know, skill in the area, it may be less useful as a brainstorm for the problem and more useful as education for someone or something.
Yeah, that's exactly the point that I'm making. It's why I've been doing it more often. You get better at the things that you do.
Right.
And for the most part, I have been doing all of the high level thinking of strategy. Yeah. And to get my team to do that, I have to get them to get reps. They have to have,
sure.
They have to have experience doing that thinking and working through that process. And the best way for them to do that is for me to walk through my process with them. And they can change it. I certainly don't think that I have the best way of doing anything.
Right.
So one of the values that I get out of this is the ideas that they may or may not come up with, right? So if you have 2 or 3 other people thinking through this with you, now all of a sudden you have 2 or 3 different perspectives on it. And that's the real value. But to shut it down because you imagine someone's going to think differently is an interesting narrative.
Yeah, I don't think I quite said that narrative, but I do appreciate that it is a different one.
Yeah, that's particularly interesting whenever it comes to something like SEO that's, it's people first. It's like it's specifically what is coming out of the consciousness of disparate minds. So if you say, hey, this is what we're trying to get to, getting different perspectives on, well, this is my starting place. I think I have to take this path to get there. Oh, well, I think this and I think that. I mean, that is in essence what you're trying to get to is how do people try to get here?
You have to answer questions. That's what it comes down to. But this is, I think, this is the whole world now. Social media, algorithms, all of this is basically what's that person searching for. Because if you're not answering their question, if you're not helping them, they're not going to stick around. And so matching that search intent with relevant content is 100% the goal. And if you don't do that, nothing else matters. Mm-hmm. The same thing for search ads or whatever. I mean, you can pay $10,000 a month for search ads and you'll get clicks. You're probably not going to convert if you don't have on the page what they're searching for.
Right.
Yeah. Brainstorming is really interesting for me because I tend to put myself into boxes. Like I start thinking inside a box and I don't know, a box could be something like in music. You've got something like music theory. These are the notes in the scale. This is the key that you're in so you can play these notes. And sort of knowing those notes, it really does empower you. It gives you freedom to riff inside of that and to be like, I know that whatever I play, it's going to make sense in some way. I might have to figure it out from then, but it works, right? So knowing the rules allows you to break them in some ways. That said, it's also a pair of handcuffs. It's a prison in a way, because there's a phrase that's called think outside the box for a reason. Like it is a box and everything outside of it is not available to you when you are inside it. So the brainstorming session, like if you actually specifically say this is brainstorming, to me, that gives me this license to break everything that I don't always feel like I have. And it's like, okay, well, we held this idea dear. Let's break it. What happens if we do? And that's the biggest benefit of a quote unquote brainstorming session for me.
That's interesting. That makes more sense why I don't value them very highly, actually.
You tend to not have a box when I experience you.
That actually that makes sense for why I probably use them more with that frame of reference.
Yeah. How so?
Oh, sometimes I have a great idea at a time that isn't good for like where the organization or whatever is going. Like right now, yes, we do need to rebuild the way the platform works for sure. But right now isn't the time for that. And so we need to deal with the day-to-day or whatever. It's not a good time to like generally be solving this large problem just practically. And so if you say, hey, let's do a brainstorming session about how we build the platform next time, then people can come to this with a proper frame. Like, this isn't what we're going to do next week. Everybody knows that. But I'm sort of always thinking about like how to make this thing better, no matter what the thing is. And I easily jump between like, oh yeah, no, we're not going to do it right now, but we have to do this. And then back to day to day. But everyone doesn't.
But what about brainstorming a specific problem? Because it seems like you're talking about on a larger level, like, oh, I come up with these ideas that maybe it's not the right time for it. But what if you have a specific problem that you are looking for the right solution for?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely tend towards independent work. So most of the specific problems I deal with have like very clear, definite solutions. They're not like, how do you see this search intent from this persona? They're like, the wrong value is in this XML tag. You know, so brainstorming on like that specific problem, I don't need it because I'll just have the vendor put the right value in the XML tag or whatever. But I don't know. This feels like an area of weakness for me. I don't know how to go to it more frequently, but I've definitely been on some bad brainstorming sessions, so I have like bad vibes about it. But
yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it is just a difference in the work that we do.
Yeah,
but
I think they specifically apply and work well in generative, creative, conceptual, abstract, systems building type of endeavors. And it's like, hey, this thing doesn't exist yet, or it exists in a certain fashion, but we're reimagining it. Let's think of everything. Does gravity have to apply this time? I don't know. Maybe we could take gravity out of the equation. Like when you start breaking those ideas, it's like you start imagining something that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly do brainstorming like with a social client or, you know, like web development, stuff like this with just the client, like some kind of shared journey or something. But the things that the brainstorming sessions, the ones that I remember being on my calendar in past lives and jobs, are like 20 people, 5 of them care.
Yeah, 20 is probably too many.
Yeah. 5 of them care, and 4 of the 5 care in a way that is primarily related to their department. So just a whole bunch of people sitting there for no reason, and 4 people saying their narrative from their view, and 1 guy trying to get it to be collaborative.
Right. Well, and that's what I mean. I think that we all have this sort of delicacy or I hold something dear. I'm very ginger with a specific idea, and I want to preserve that idea no matter what. And I think the brainstorming session, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of like improv, right? It's very much this yes and sort of thing. Like, what can we just go with? We don't have to end up there, but let's get one narrative here. Okay, what do we like from it? What do we not? Okay, let's pull out these 3 things and get rid of the rest, and let's start a new narrative. What does this one look like? I think that cool stuff can happen there, but it definitely takes, hey, this doesn't endanger what currently exists. We have to go into this idea with no sort of conservatism. We just have to be imaginative. We have to be creative. We have to be kids playing pretend again.
Yeah. I mean, I do tons of it on my own. Like, it's the primary activity I do, that what you just said. Solo. Like, that's an idea I strongly hold. Is it good? Is there other parts I should keep? Should I let go of it? This is always happening for me. But sharing this process with others feels different.
Yeah. Well, to kind of answer your question about coming up with an idea and just running with it with no right or wrong. there's an element to that, but at some point you have to pare it down. So
Sure.
if you think about starting with divergent thinking, just without judgment, let's throw as many ideas out here as we can. Dream big. Don't think with any constraints. Just let's think about ideas. And then once you have whatever, 20, 30, 40 ideas, now you can start to look at that a little bit more and think about what's realistic. But there does have to be at least in a creative brainstorm, I think there has to be a certain element of, okay, there's no constraints to start with. And then now you start to pare it down.
Can you actually, like a small scale example, take us through that? Like 5 ideas that come up and how you pare them down to something that's search intent that's good, that you like?
Man. That's really hard to come up with on the spot, because it's we deal with so many different industries. And so I'd have to come up with a really good idea. And depending on the client, for example, you can be more creative. If we sort of have the spectrum of if you think just basic service clients, so people who do HVAC or roofing or whatever, right? And that's pretty in a box, because here are the things that they do. There's only so many ways to present that.
Sure.
And it's more predictable what people are searching for. So if I need my air conditioning repaired, that's what they're searching for. There's not a lot of variability.
What do they search for?
Usually something like AC repair or AC repair companies, things like that. So that this is very sort of narrow, because you kind of know the things that they're searching for. But then I have clients who do SaaS consulting. Okay, now this box gets a lot more broad, because not only do they do each page is going to narrow down by software, but not only do they do lots of different kinds of software, but I have a client I have a SaaS client that does SaaS. They resell, and then they also do consulting, and they do it in the engineering manufacturing space, but they're doing data management software. They're doing simulation software, fluid simulation software, CPQ. They're doing all of these different things that have different applications, right? But they also all work together. So now it becomes a lot more okay, we're working on this right now from the standpoint of what are the broader problems that people are trying to solve. So we're looking at, there's a massive engineering talent gap. So here's a problem silo. There's also people trying to digitally transform their businesses in general, their manufacturing business. So there's this problem silo. And then you have the customer experience, speed to market. These are the major problems that you're trying to solve, but then you need to funnel that down to this one software. So how do we look at how does data management software help solve the talent gap problem? Yeah. So now you've narrowed it a little bit. Now you're okay, well, here's all the possible ways that I could argue that data management software can help you solve your engineering talent gap, right? And now we look at all of the problems that we think we can solve with this, and we go, okay, which ones do we have the best arguments for? And now we're looking at these three. So it's kind of that's the process.
Sure. So in that, other people recommend ways that data management can solve the talent gap in the meeting, in the brainstorming session.
Say that one more time.
Others who are in the meeting say, well, I think data management can solve the talent gap with this reason.
Yeah, it doesn't even necessarily have to be from an ideation standpoint. It can be we can search for these different ways that might make sense, and then we can discuss it.
No,
So it's not necessarily
I'm
that
curious,
I'm
like what makes it brainstorming? Like what are the mechanics of others' involvement?
it's a conversation.
I mean, they say, well, I searched and I found this.
Yeah, and then we look at that problem and say, okay, does it make sense? So here I'll say, okay, data management software increases collaboration and security, and it creates a single source of truth for your design files, which makes life for engineers easier, makes collaboration better. Does this make sense? If I offer this and other companies don't, does this theoretically make it better for us to retain our engineering talent? I could make that argument. I don't know if that's true, but I can make that argument. Does that make sense to you, Frank? No, I'm saying, I'm saying as an example, like it's a conversation. It's less we're throwing out ideas and more talking about it. Does this make sense? And you're having it from, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 people in the room, you have 5 different perspectives on this. And maybe somebody goes, oh no, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And here's why it doesn't make sense.
Gotcha.
That's brainstorming.
All right.
I've definitely had my mind changed. Like I've had an idea that I went, oh, this totally makes sense to me. And then I've had 2 people in the room go, no, because this, and this. And then I think about it more and I go, yeah, you're right. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would do it with the right people.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, maybe I'm a little too predictive or projecty or something, but I often know. I often prepare myself in ways to know how others will respond before I have conversations with them.
Mm. Yeah.
That's sort of just how I approach the world or something. So
I think that's definitely something that could be problematic.
Yeah. To brainstorming or to life?
No, I think in general, I think it could be problematic. If you assume you know what somebody's going to respond or how they're going to respond.
Sure.
Super problematic. And then you're cutting off that diversity of thought if you stop it before it starts.
Sure. I don't know if it's super problematic to prepare, but
I don't think it's problematic to prepare, but you said that you will, you said, I know how people are going to respond before they do.
I said, I often try to predict that. Yeah.
Okay. Those aren't the words you said, but I understand the difference now. But still, I think it could be problematic if you allow it to shut down.
Definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that I've most recently engaged with brainstorming was like working with a small startup type of company that was looking to hire a new position. And it was like, well, maybe we'll do sales, maybe we'll do strategy, but we know that essentially the person who's doing sales now is doing both of these roles. We got to free them up so that they can, follow a lot more of these leads that we're getting so that, we can run operations essentially, right? Hands are tied because there's just not enough resource here. And the organization was looking at it and they were like, okay, well, we got to plan for the future. We got to make sure that we've got enough sales flow here to support another position, benefits, all of this type of stuff. And whenever it came down to it, it was like, okay, well, my feet are getting a little bit cold. Maybe it's not time to hire another person right now. What are the other options, right? What can we do instead? And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, hiring another person, this is still an option, but let's throw it away for a second. What are the other options? Well, we could still hire a person, but instead of a senior level position, we could call it an associate level position or something, salaries lower, something like that. Okay, well, that's still a problem because, sales are a little bit spotty. Okay, well, what if we, instead of hiring a strategist, we hire a sales position and we make it a commission-based position. So baseline salary is lower, but they bring up their salary with a different type of compensation model. That means they don't get paid unless they sell. That guarantees sales, right? okay, well, that's possible. Let's think about it in different terms. What if we changed our ad campaign and we actually just guaranteed a larger inflow of leads? And once we got those sales, yeah, it might be a little tight at first, but then, we'll come to this position. And so it moves from we absolutely need a strategist to, well, maybe we'll do sales to maybe we'll change the compensation model to maybe actually we should just focus on ads right now. And, all of it's the same dollars, but where are you going to put them? And, when you take yourself out of this box of we're definitely hiring this person, this role, and it looks like this, all of a sudden, new opportunities present.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But it takes, putting yourself in that position. It takes, like I said, not holding an idea dear and just saying what could be. We had another situation where we were looking at like a customer journey and mapped the whole thing out beginning to end. And it was like, wow, the value proposition here is that, it's all white glove. It is like we're taking them in a custom journey here and they're going to, get a custom product, but it takes forever. Like that is not a great experience. How do we make this more efficient? How do we cut some time out of this? And so it goes like, okay, well, currently, we're doing this sort of discovery process that takes 8 weeks. That's a long time. What are the options here? Could we change these in-person meetings into an intake form, an online customer experience? Could we change it from 4 separate occasions that we meet into a single intensive day where, everything else gets put down and we just focus on these 4 tasks? Like, what does that look like? So reimagining these processes also, all of a sudden it's like, well, it could be anything.
Yeah. I think I do brainstorming a lot in one-on-one context.
Mm-hmm.
The more I think about it, but I don't know. It feels something about it doesn't feel good, like with more than 3 people to me.
That makes sense.
I don't know if there's a value in it at more than 3 people, but it seems like the cohesiveness gets lost or something.
When I think about like an improv show, right? Noah, you said start with divergent thinking. Like, what is the first thing they do? They say, okay, let's get some ideas from the audience. And they do. They collect like 10, 15 ideas. And then all of a sudden from there, big time funnel happens. All right, 3 people are taking this idea and running with it.
Sure.
But even at that point, it's still divergent thinking. They'll select an idea, but then you're yes-anding it as they actually play. Mm-hmm. They're actually yes-anding this idea. So it's expanding again.
Sure.
And if you create rules, one of the things about improv is like the more rules that are created within that world, the more specific things are going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you sort of control it. Specificity is how you control it.
Right.
So if you're in a scene and you act scared, but you don't identify what's scaring you, then the other person has to figure that out. Yeah. But if you act scared and go, oh my God, there's a lion. Mm-hmm. Now we're all on the same page. Yeah. We know exactly what you're scared of.
Well, that's sort of what I mean here is like, if you ask a room full of people, what are all the ideas you get? Okay, we're in outer space. No, we're in a jungle. No, we're at Niagara Falls, right? And then when you narrow that down to sort of what Frank was saying, and it's like, well, there's probably a cap. All of a sudden, you've got a greater and more conducive environment to collaboration because you're limiting the scope of, well, we all think this is a good idea, but Jack over there, he's a weirdo and he keeps just breaking this in weird ways. Can't seem to get him on board. That's sort of what I mean. In anthropology, we learned a lot about like this process of going from a band to a tribe to a chiefdom to a state and what happens in sort of the evolution of civilization. And essentially what it is like, if you have 6 people in a group, great. You can collaborate. You can create total equality. When that number hits 7, you need some sort of leader. You need someone think about a jury. Like, this is the person who is going to collect the votes and all this stuff. And there are certain moments in group expansion and numbers where that happens again and again. It's like, okay, here we need one leader. Here we need a bureaucracy. And those have like specific numbers, 250, 3,000, that sort of thing. And I think that definitely happens when things are going off the rails with imagination. The fewer, the better. You still want diversity, but you have to turn it into productivity at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of when I worked on EPCR software, and several times at several different companies, someone would propose the idea of a user group where you invited lots of field users of the software and, sort of talked through a problem and some of the solutions that might work. And almost universally, these meetings end on talking, you end up talking about something you didn't intend to talk about because the loudest guy in the room keeps bringing it up, or girl or whatever. But that is like what comes to mind, the larger the group of brainstorming. Like, if you get the strongest personality in the room involved in a brainstorm, you are going to talk about what they want to talk about. And that, so I would prefer to have those conversations one-on-one, get a sense of all the strongest personalities and what they want, and find a way to do it collaboratively. And then maybe, like, once I understand where everyone's coming from, what they want, then have a group meeting where we talk through some of the pros and cons of something. But I don't know. Yeah, that's my experience with it.
I guarantee you there's some body of literature in academia that, studies, probably has a scale to measure creativity of thought, probably has studied, exactly the effect of brainstorming on this. And then there's probably a subfield that turns that into an application in business, in law, in all these things. But, who's going to look that up?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we will here on this podcast, but someone might.
Yeah. But that's my point. If we just take this idea, research it over the next week, and then talk about it next week, we could talk about brainstorming next week. What do you guys think?
I think I'd be way more prepared to talk about it next week, and the conversation would be better.
But you know what? That wouldn't be good brainstorming, because you wouldn't bring diversity of thought. You would bring preparation of thought.
All right, so we're calling this one Brainstorming on Brainstorming, and next week will be Origins Brainstorming.
Dude. Origins meta.
Origins brainstorming on brainstorming.
Yeah.
And then Origins brainstorming.
Yeah.
I like, you know what? That could be a really interesting case study, though. What's this conversation look like unprepared? What's this conversation look like prepared?
All right. Well, this was all about brainstorming on brainstorming, and we'll catch you next week for brainstorming. Thanks for listening.
Brainstorming on brainstorming. Stacks on stacks on stacks.
Stacks. Hey, it's Frank again. Thanks for listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. You can also check us out online at theunbecomingplatypus.com. We hope these conversations inspire you to improve your communication skills and deepen your connections with your own friends and loved ones. Until next time, this has been the Unbecoming Platypus podcast.